Hi, welcome back. We're on lesson 20 of our VQ workbook 1. First word is alleviate. Alleviate the pain. Alleviate is to lessen or to mitigate. It means to lessen some bad condition that you have. The prefix here is add, to, or toward, which we have memorized, right? And levy, as in light. We saw this root in the word gravity. Gravity, grave, is about heavy things, and levy is about light things. And then we have ate, which is to make it that way. So to alleviate is to make something lighter. And that's usually some kind of pain that you have. You might relieve that pain, make it lighter, then you alleviate the pain. And the image here is for the Aleve painkillers. That's a competitor of Advil and Tylenol. I believe the name is related to the word alleviate, or is supposed to make you think of the word alleviate. Although if they were doing it correctly by the roots and the correct spelling, they should have two L's. Then I will be sure. But in this case, they used only one L, but the meaning is the same. The idea is to alleviate the pain. Calculated. Calculated decision. And that is deliberately planned. Of course, you know what a calculator is. You use it all the time. So to have a calculated decision means it was very carefully planned, as if you did it with a calculator, planning things out. So here's an example: a calculated attempt to deceive voters. And that would mean that the people in charge of the election, or the politicians, they made a calculated decision, calculated attempt. That means they planned it out ahead of time, and it was an intentional deception of the voters. Or he took a calculated risk, meaning that he knew what he was getting into. It was risky, but he had planned it out and he thought about it. He calculated all the pros and cons to it. Detached. Feel detached from his family, and that is to be emotionally removed. Or you're calm and objective because you're not emotionally attached to it. So it is the opposite of attach. We have attach and detach. We can talk about how you attach or detach things physically, as in using a scotch tape or a Velcro. You can attach things together, put them together, or pull them apart, and you detach them physically. And so we can also talk about the emotional attachment and detachment. You get a puppy and you get very attached to that puppy emotionally. And later on, you get detached emotionally apart. Enmity. Enmity between the enemies. The enmity is the ill will or the hatred. And we use the word enemies because it looks similar to enmity. Most of the letters are the same, so it shouldn't be too hard to memorize this phrase, enmity between the enemies. We can look at some sample sentences. There's a long history of enmity between them, long history of hatred, rivalry, kind of ill will between them. His comments earned him the enmity of his co-workers. Okay, well, whatever he said, it caused the other people to feel hatred toward him. And one more, we need to put aside old enmities for the sake of peace, our old hostilities, our old feelings. Guile. Guile and deceit. Guile is deceit, duplicity, wiliness, some kind of trickery and deception. And so here in the image, this is a character, the guy there. I don't know who the girl is, but the guy is a character named Guile. That was his name. And this is a character from Street Fighter 2, a very famous game, but back a couple of decades ago. And it's in there because back when we originally made up the phrases, the original phrase for this word was Guile used guile to defeat Ken, because just about everybody at that time knew what this game was, and they all could relate and they could imagine Guile, the character, and it was very useful. But as time passed, nobody knew what Guile, who Guile was anymore. I'm sure you probably don't. And so we had to change the phrase in this case. Guile and deceit. This guy uses trickery, deception, maybe uses weapons that he's not supposed to. Then he is using guile. Here's a sample sentence. A person so full of guile, he can't even be trusted to give you the correct time of the day. Okay, so he's just lying all the time. He's always deceitful. He's full of guile. Innate. Innate talent for music. If something is innate, that talent is inborn or inherent. We have seen the word inherent, which means that you are born with it in the sense that it is part of your characteristic. But the word innate is more about the being born with it, because the in is in and the root nat here is about being born, the birth. So we talk about the native people that uses that root, and when we talk about the nativity scene during Christmas, that is the birth of Jesus we're talking about. That is the nativity that we celebrate. So the nat is about being born. So innate is more about how you're born with it. Inherent is basically the same, but it's more about the characteristic that is natural to that person or that object. So there is a slight difference in nuance when you're discussing different things. Munificent. Munificent benefactor. And that is being very generous. And what word did we see that was very generous? I think we talked about benevolent. Benevolent priest, did we? Benefactor. What was the priest that we talked about? Magnanimous priest, wasn't it? Yes. So when you want to think about, you got that idea in your head and you want to think about it, you know it was something about a priest, and you do exactly what I did. Think of the priest, you know there was an adjective in front of it, and try to recall that phrase that you memorized, because it should come out together as one word. What was the phrase? What was the word before priest? Something priest. And we have very similar words, so I have different words running in my mind, but you should have thought of magnanimous priest right away. And we talked about how magnanimous means big-hearted, that is very generous. Freely giving, that's what munificent is. So you can have a munificent donor who gives money very freely, or a munificent gift, that is a very generous gift. And benefactor, of course, I think we talked about it before, is a bene, good, fact, to do person. So person who does good things, like philanthropist, right? Donation by the philanthropist. And you also know the word altruistic, altruistic donation. So these words are all related. Prevalent, prevalent view. Prevalent view is the widespread view, the generally accepted view. So the prevalent view is the prevalent attitude of the society at that time. So in the picture here, yes, we see protesters against Donald Trump, because that seems to be the prevalent attitude among a lot of young people. It's just what's out there and what seems common, and you feel like you have to go along with it because part of it, peer pressure, I suppose. Prevalent custom is the custom tradition that is prevalent in that culture, that is very common, it's an accepted custom. Prevalent teaching method, maybe like the Montessori method used in kindergarten classes. That is a particular teaching method, and that might be the prevalent method of the time. Prevalent fashion among teenagers. In different eras, teenagers do different things. There was a time when all the boys and the girls too, they used to walk around with baggy kind of pants or loose pants and show their underwear as part of their fashion. I never understood that. I don't know if kids are doing that still. I haven't seen much of it lately. But these are the fashion fads. It was a very prevalent thing at the time. Rigor. Rigor of military training. The rigor is the severity, the harshness, how difficult and strict that thing is. So, of course, when we think of military training, we think of that as being very harsh, harsh conditions, such as the rigors of life in the wilderness. If you went out into the wilderness and you were on a survival tour or something, and you had to survive on your own, that would be very difficult. It will be very rigorous for you. Or we can talk about the strictness of some condition, as in they conducted the experiment with scientific rigor. So this we're talking about scientists in a lab who are doing experiments, and they're being very rigorous, meaning very strict with measurements and cleaning and all those details. Scientific rigor. I'm sure there's more to it than cleaning, vials and stuff, but basically, how strict they are is the rigor. Thrive. Bees thrive in the summer. To thrive is to prosper and to flourish. It means you grow very well. So you are growing vigorously. And you can talk about plants and animals growing vigorously. Like this sentence, the plants thrive with relatively little sunlight. They grow very well. Or we often use the word to talk about the economy. The economy is thriving under President Trump. So we can talk about those different kinds of situations where everything seems to be growing and prospering and everything's energized and things are thriving. Thanks for watching. I will see you back here in the next video.